Okay, so I guess we got another, oh no, here we go. So it being 7 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order. I have asked Ken to be recording secretary temporarily until we elect a secretary. So first the thing I'd like to go over some of the goals that I'd like to see from the Finance Committee. And I guess it's pretty much the same as last year, to be an advisor to all of the town voters and to make recommendations on every article that comes before town meeting. And that way you're advising the voters that you've investigated things and that you have taken a position that on balance is positive for the town, and understanding that there is no such thing as a perfect decision. There's always trade-offs, and I think that's what we're looking for the Finance Committee to do, is to make those trade-offs and create that balance. The other thing is to have a written summary for every article that goes on to it, and hopefully you could publish that before the warrant is published, but understanding that there's always some last minute changes and things, you know, as long as you have something written, even if that's a pass out at town meeting, I think that's a good thing. And then people can get a chance to read that kind of thing before the article actually comes up and think about what you have said. The other thing is to attend the various different budget meetings and have liaisons to the various different committees that could impact the main budget that we some 40 something million dollars every year. So that's good. So I guess you guys did a great job the last several years, last year being no exception. Your batting average has been very good, in over 90% on every town meeting. And I think that speaks well for the committee, that the voters have trust in you and therefore have gone pretty much with your recommendations. And I would like to express my very personal thanks to all of the time and effort that you guys put in, and congratulate you for doing a wonderful job. Anyway, at this point, I'd like to take nominations for a chair. Would somebody like to make a nomination?
This is Peter, Ken. I would like to nominate Alana as chair.
Okay. Do I have any other nominations?
You need a second for that, so I'll second.
Okay, so I don't have any further nominations. Therefore, all those in favor, I guess I do a roll call just to be sure. So, Alana, what are you thinking?
Yes.
Let's see, Ken?
Yes.
I say Jillian.
Yes.
See, Elliot's not here. Peter?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
And Katie?
Yes.
So it's unanimous. Your chair is now Elena. I'd like to take nominations for a secretary.
I would like to nominate Katie Moore.
Okay.
I'll second that. Or if Ken, you can if you want.
Any other nominations? Okay. All those in favor of Elena?
Yes.
Jillian?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Elena.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. I will hope to continue on as chair. I know I learned a lot this past year, so hopefully we'll move full steam ahead this year. We don't by charter, I think, need a vice chair, but we do normally have one in case I can't be present or whatnot. And so I guess we could go ahead and do a vote for that, even though it's not really needed necessarily. So Jillian, I believe we talked to you, or we'll go ahead and do a nomination. I would nominate Jillian.
I'll second that.
Any other thoughts, other nominations? All right, then we'll do a vote on that. Ken,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
and Jillian.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And
Do
yourself,
we get all six? Who would we miss?
Alana.
Oh, sorry, I'm a yes as well. Thank you. Thank you. For legal purposes, as we're opening the meeting up, we do need to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. So please be careful to not put anything on your screen that you don't want captured in the recording. And also, as Dick has said, all votes tonight will be taken as a roll call vote in this format.
And I would just like to clarify that now that Katie is secretary, I will send her my notes, but she can take notes from this point forward.
I'll see if they're as good as my notes, Ken, but I was also taking.
I'll race you to
Thank
the
you.
bottom on that.
Thank you very much. Appreciated. All right, so moving on the agenda this evening is a discussion and vote on some reserve fund transfers from the school department. We have Wayne White with us, the business manager from the school department, and we also have Natasha Rivera on the school committee. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Would you, Natasha or Wayne, do you want to have me share the Excel first with all of them and we can talk about them, or do you want to go through the reserve fund transfer forms? Do you have a preference?
I think you can leave it up to you. I think Wayne,
Okay.
I don't know if we intended to do any presentation, just more to field any questions or concerns. So
Okay.
however.
All right. Why don't I'll open the reserve fund transfer forms themselves then, and we can go through them one at a time.
Can you just give a total of what we're talking about with all of them, or maybe briefly share the spreadsheet
Sure.
that shows all of them?
Yep. 1 second. I can do that. So here is the spreadsheet. So it's that total right here, 27,877.15, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they are getting grouped sort of by type into 3 reserve fund transfers.
Yes, just to maybe kind of level set a little bit. So there was a little bit of how to best group these, because there are different invoices, but they were kind of based on the system and the incident. I guess, Alana, that was the advisement recommendation in doing the 3. The 11,000 number there, I believe that is the combination of one of them that we were just trying to do that adding.
Yeah,
I think it's the Guardian.
right. Yeah. The 11,277.15 is a combination of the 13,13.15 and the 9,964.
All right. So let's see, let's look at the forms. Can everybody see that okay? This is the one you were just talking about, actually. We'll start off there, Wayne. The 11,277.15. So do you just want to give us maybe a brief
Yeah.
talk
Yeah,
about
sure.
this one? Yeah.
All
Okay.
of these are basically the same, and that, as you already probably know, the school budget is not funded in such a way to be able to handle any substantial capital expenses. As you know, majority of our budget is directed towards curriculum and salaries. We also mentioned the fact that our facilities rental revolving account, which is where I normally would use funds to address any capital repairs that need to be done. As you can imagine, COVID, put a kibosh on that, and there was revenue that was not received. And so the coffers are pretty bare in terms of that. In addition, as a result of COVID protocols, windows were kept open during the winter. This did a number of things. One, it drove up our energy costs, and two, put more demand on an aging heating system that is running with constant cold air coming into the rooms. And we can talk about individual stuff, but that's the narrative that I've given kind of applies to all three of these RFT forms.
Okay. And this one, as you said, is to pay Guardian Energy Management is the vendor.
I'm sorry, say again.
This one is for Guardian Energy Management.
Yep, the 13th. Yep, both
Yep.
of them are Guardian. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Are there any questions or comments on this one? We'll take them one at a time. This one from the FinCom.
Lana, I
Are
have a
these
question.
things where we have,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jillian, and then I'll get to you, Lori.
are these things where we have a contract with a certain people to fix and maintain the boilers, or is this like a process that's bidded out?
No, we
Because I think
don't.
usually if something's over $10,000, it has to be bid out, and these all seem to be less than that.
You're correct that costs over 10,000 have to be bid out. I didn't hear the second part.
These are all less than that. We're combining them to more than that for this, but in your accounting,
Yeah.
they're all less than that. So they did not require a bidding process.
Correct.
But is this like,
Okay.
I think Jillian's question was, is this like someone we use all the time, or are you calling them up, each time something breaks, or we have like a relationship with them? Is that?
That's something more of a facilities answer, but from my perspective, yeah, it's kind of a combination of ad hoc of who has the capability to work on our boilers. I'm told that because of the age of, say, Green Meadow, and even to a certain extent the middle school, that not everybody is trained to work on them. And then it's who has familiarity, and that's usually a decision that facilities people make. I usually don't get too involved in telling them who to pick, other than, if I start to see, the company coming out, twice a month, every month, that might raise a flag from my end, from a cost perspective. But as far as the selection of the companies, like you said, I watch in terms of procurement. I have informed everyone in the district, not just facilities, that we need to be careful about, let's just say, for example, we use Joe Smith furnace, and we've used them for the last 10 years. That might raise a procurement red flag as to why we're not rotating or why we're not using other people. So we are aware of that. And to my knowledge, Guardian Energy Management does not, at least as far as I know right now, doesn't fall in that area where we raise suspicion about why we're not diversifying our contractors.
Okay. Lori, you had a question?
Great.
Yeah, I'm confused a little bit about the transfer and where the funds are to be transferred to, because it's saying that, talks about your operating budget not being sufficient, but you're asking to transfer to a rental revolving fund, which cannot be done with the reserve fund money.
But this was, the money did not come from the operating budget. We said we didn't have funds in the operating budget, and we had to use the school choice revolving fund.
Well, the reserve fund is meant to be transferred within the general fund, not to be transferred out to other funds.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The reserve fund is meant to be used within the general fund for a transfer, not to be transferred out to other funds such as revolving. It's meant to be used within the general fund to transfer to different departments that can't, are deficient in their budgets. So that's why I was confused, because you're talking about the general fund being not sufficient.
So the lines on the general fund, just to clarify, because I did go back and look, are negative on that, and the revolving fund, it does not have a sufficient amount to offset all of these.
Okay, well,
So I don't know
the
what the
funds
best
can't be
approach, I
transferred.
mean, I don't know what the best approach would that be, like what it would be, but that's where the supporting documentation that Wayne provided about the general fund lines were just to show that they are not
Right.
funded.
I think we just need to change this form, and that the account to be transferred to is the general fund for this amount, because as Lori is saying, you cannot put a reserve fund money into an account that is a revolving account.
Anything outside the general fund. I can't transfer outside the general fund.
Right. So I know what you're saying, Wayne and Natasha, it's that the revolving fund is where you would normally pay for this type of an expense, and that the revolving fund does not have the funds to do it. However, for reserve fund purposes, the revolving fund isn't really involved in this. We need to transfer it to the general fund. You could always use, if there were some in the revolving fund, you could use some of that to pay the bill, but we can't put the reserve fund money into that account. It has to go in the general fund account so that you can pay the rest of it from there. Does that make sense?
Wayne, yeah, can I ask a question? Because I know we're at July 11th and, getting towards the end of closing the year. Does that change in any way, complicate stuff, Wayne, for what you've been trying to close the books? Or is that I just want to make sure that, time is not on our side a lot with some of these. And I know we don't have a school committee meeting, if there's any need to vote on stuff for transferring. So I just want to make sure that sounds doable for you, Wayne, and that.
Well, I don't know what the procedure is. I would have to see, when this transfer to the general fund occurs, because you're right, but the general fund is coming to a quick close this week. And then I'm going to have my final warrant to the town by Wednesday of this week. So I don't know what was the plan, what has been the history. This is my first time going through this process. When and where, if we were granted this, when and where would the funds be moved or appropriated?
It would be, I could transfer it tomorrow morning, as long as you tell me what general fund account you want me to transfer it into, and they vote on that tonight. I can make the transfer tomorrow morning. And the funds would be available to you immediately to use.
So I guess from that perspective, it would alter my bottom line, what I look at. just for argument's sake, let's say that my bottom line is a negative 27,000. This transfer, it would balance it. You know, and I would go from there. So I would then do my adjustments to our operating budget, you know, taking this into consideration then.
So Alana and
Mhm.
Lori, just to make sure that we're understanding, is that number needed at this moment, or is that something that can be provided? It doesn't sound like it's critical for the vote
No,
necessarily.
we can
Okay.
vote we can vote on it and say you know, contingent upon correction of the form that the account to be transferred to gets filled in, you know, gets changed.
Okay. Lord, does that sound doable
Yeah, as
for
long as they
you?
vote to transfer to a general fund account within the school department budget, I'm fine with that. And then Wayne can tell me, like this one, I'm looking at your budget right now. Maintenance of plants would probably be the proper line to transfer it into, since that is what this is.
That's what we were kind of thinking, like, you know, but I didn't know the number. And I don't know if Wayne had it handy, but that probably is where I'm
Yeah.
guessing that would happen.
I was gonna say I have the number if you want to put it on there. If not, just like I said, if you want to just vote to transfer it within the general fund school budget, I think that's fine.
Okay.
So I'd just like to make an observation that I'm assuming that this form has been running around since the 16th of June. It's just surprising me a little bit that we're just now having the discussion on the mechanics of how to do this. And, you know, I don't mind us having the discussion as much as it just seems like we ought to have, you know, have these worked out before this form goes before the Board of Selectmen for their vote, this select board for their vote, much less coming before us. So maybe in the future, this is something that, you know, the actual mechanics could be worked out. And I guess I'm just wondering, I guess why that didn't happen here.
I mean, we did send this, you know, a little bit. It was like there was a couple of iterations, but this form was sent, I think, June
Yeah.
20th, maybe, or something to that effect. And
Yeah.
To, I think, all stakeholders, the select board, the town.
No,
Alana. So I just would be wondering.
So
where, you
I
know,
get
feedback.
that. I get that,
Yeah.
Natasha. But the point is that, you know, there's, you know, an account number from an account number to, and it seems like that's a Wayne Laurie discussion about exactly how this is going to work. That ought to be happening. It doesn't have to happen via form. I mean, maybe that's an email or what have you. And my point here is not to sit there and try to litigate why this happened, you know, so much as to say what happened this time that maybe next time, you know, we're not sitting here in a FinCom meeting trying to, you know, work out the mechanics on this. But that's just my opinion as one member.
So in business, we have a thing called corrective action. What are you going to do to prevent this from occurring again? And so it could be as simple as a form that has on it the ground rules of what a transfer has to be. And I might say that it has to go to the general fund account or a general fund account.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, I'm not suggesting a change in process or a change in form. I guess what I'm saying is, you know, we have a form here. It's a fairly simple, straightforward form with here's where it's coming from, here's where it's going to, and maybe an email or something to sit there and say, hey, is this the right number, et cetera. So.
Yeah.
I think the school using the reserve fund is very new to all of us as well. You know, usually it's always town departments transferring within the general fund budget.
I don't know,
This is
Peter,
a new process.
Peter, have we never had reserve fund transfers to the school in the past?
No, we did have one having to do with the asbestos at Green Meadow not too long ago. I think that was 3 years ago. It was
That's what I was saying. I mean, I
19.
don't,
Yeah, I think
Well, I think it
19.
was new to Wayne. Because
Yes.
he's emailed me and
Yeah.
asked me what the reserve fund was and how to access it. So I
Right.
think maybe
Yeah.
new to some of the school committee members now and to Wayne and Brian.
Right.
But frankly, I'd rather us spend our time talking about the
Mhm.
relative merits of the reserve fund rather than the mechanics of the reserve fund transfer.
I will just, to Dick's point, because people leave on, whether it's committee members or, staff, I wonder if adding a sheet, like a preamble sheet ahead of this document of some of those, because I will say a lot of hours were spent on gathering and trying to make sure that it was done with fidelity. And so, but clearly we have, there's room to learn. So maybe that might help a little bit, because that was a little bit hard to kind of figure out as well. Like some of those, Alana, we had some emails back and forth, maybe. So maybe some bullet points of those, guardrails would be really helpful to codify in a document 1 or document 2 that's attached to the form.
Well, generally, you don't transfer money outside of the general fund without town meeting vote. So honestly, I just assumed everybody was aware of that. That you could only transfer a reserve fund was only done within the general fund.
So
Yeah, I
when you
think it's-
say, when you make that statement,
Yeah.
so I think that comes as news to me. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not the expert, so I get that. And so I guess what I'm saying, is that a general practice, or is that the law relative to reserve fund transfers?
That's the law.
Okay, I guess we need to.
Yeah.
I think for what it's worth, this is Greg Johnson, Town Administrator. I already wrote down, as you were saying it, that we need to have better communication between the offices, which is something that the business office on the superintendent side and my finance wing, which is something that Lori and I have talked about, and Brian and Wayne, we've all talked about. Like, we need to be on the same page, especially as like we're all sort of like new to our roles, so to speak, and learning it. So I think this is fine. It's constructive, and I mean, it does say at the top, Chapter 40 of Mass General Law. I also understand, I've been doing this long enough to know that people don't look that up, but we will do some highlights and bullets, and it's fine. It's a form. We're bureaucrats. We can make a better form.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Alana,
Yep.
separate from this, and apologies to the rest, but I can't find that you forwarded these to FinCom in email. Unless I'm like totally, I tend to look at the actual email stuff rather than. So anyway, it doesn't have to be right now, but
No,
at some point,
if that's,
I'm
if
sorry
that is
if
the
I've
case,
missed
I
it, but-
apologize. No. If that, I will make sure you have them. I thought I had, so we'll definitely.
You may have, and I just can't find it, so I
Right,
apologize.
right.
I see it on the end of a chain on Tuesday, June 28th, if that helps narrow it down.
That would help. Wait, from who? From Alana? I don't have a June
Yeah, from the
28th.
FinCom address from
It's
Alana.
you know what? It might have been from the FinCom address, which is why if you search Alana, you didn't see it.
Sorry.
That's
Still get
okay.
used to that.
That's sorry.
I do have it. Right. Sorry.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Nope,
sorry.
that's
Thank
good.
you.
No, I'm glad we found it for you.
Alana,
Yep.
we have 2 candidates this evening, Kevin and Matthew. And I didn't know whether you might give them the opportunity to ask a question after the FinCom itself asks their questions.
Certainly if they would like to. I don't want to put them on the spot. But if you do have any questions at any time during the meeting, feel free to raise your hands.
So I do have a question. Are you looking for us to ask questions about this item in discussion? Or are you looking us to ask questions about the operation of the FinCom?
Items in discussion.
Okay. So, I mean, as you guys are talking, I was just checking the Mass Municipal Association's FinCom handbook, and I didn't see any restriction there, albeit it's just a guideline, but I didn't see any restriction regarding the specific target account for the transfer. But but that's just all I've seen so far. I think, yeah, so I think that putting in the preamble in the form is probably the solution to this challenge. But other than that, I've been following along, but I think this is pretty straightforward otherwise, other than this procedural hiccup, at least so far.
Okay, are there any other questions from or discussion before we put this reserve fund transfer to a vote?
I might have missed it. Can I just ask quickly why it was broken into two parts? I just, because we talked earlier about how if it's over $10,000, it has to go out to bid. Were they at different times, or because it's the same company, right?
Let me look at the
These
dates on
were
these.
These were two separate bills. It wasn't broken apart. Hold on. At least to my knowledge.
Yeah, it looks like there's two different invoice numbers.
Yeah,
One invoice is 4499 and one is 4503.
They do appear to be the same service though, and on the same date. So I don't know if maybe that's a slight gray area, but in terms of going over the 10, but they are two separate charges.
Is the
Yeah.
date on here the general ledger date, or is it the date of service? Because it looks like it's referencing a different date in the line memo, so I'm not sure if that's just the date it got put into AP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, these happened in there was a couple of incidents. So there was try to replace, I remember when this happened, it was like late January and then early February. So I think there was an attempt to replace something, and then they had to order that ECM pump, which I think was the replace.
Okay, so they did like a quick fix in February and then they got the full pump.
I think, yeah, I remember
that-
in reading something, it was broken out that way. It
Okay.
wasn't like a project that all happened at once. There was a
Got it. That makes sense.
yeah, and also I'm looking at the actual invoices. The dates on the invoices are not the same. The dates you're looking
Okay.
is when they got entered the system.
Yep.
The date of the invoice for the 9900 is April 25th. And
Okay.
the invoice date on the other one is April 29th.
Does that answer your question, Jillian?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, I will
All right,
entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve the reserve fund transfer for $11,277.15 to the appropriate school general fund account.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Ken,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. All right. Moving on to the next one. This one again is 3 separate. Got them here. This is the air duct services, 3 different charges. So it is together over a 10,000 amount, but not individually.
So same here, the account to be transferred to will have to change, I'm assuming.
Yes, correct. We will have this go into the general fund.
Can we get some background on this? Like, it looks like it's a mold related issue, and I'm wondering whether it's something that we should expect that we're going to have continuing issues with it.
I'm sorry, say again?
Do you have some background on what caused this and whether we might expect to have recurring issues? It looks like it's mold related and that there were a couple areas that were impacted.
I don't have any background on this. I would have to get that, but I can tell you I have not seen any further bills that have come across the business office relating to mold or this particular issue.
I feel though in the past, mold has been an issue in Green Meadow, and hence the new building of it, and perhaps, but.
But one of these is Fowler and the bottom two are the high school, I believe. Am I reading that spreadsheet correctly?
Let me see.
Yeah, I think you're correct, Peter. Ceiling repair at Fowler is the 6,700, and then ceiling repair and bathroom ceiling repair, each the 2,200.
Yeah, the invoice is 6,700 is the mold remediation, the auditorium. It says on the invoice, and then there's athletic bathroom and partial ceiling and teacher prep area.
Sorry, here I can show those invoices.
I don't know if that helps with.
So I do have a question about this,
Okay, Kevin, go ahead.
if you don't
What's the
mind.
other one?
So from what I understand about mold, having gone through this before, mold needs a moist environment in order to thrive. Now, when this mold remediation was done, did anyone observe any water damage to the roof? Is there has to be some sort of moisture accumulating, so that could either be like either the roof is leaking, or it's coming from a water pipe, or it's just a generally humid area. Do we know right now what the cause of this mold accumulation is?
No, I don't. I do know that the facilities manager had wanted funds because he said that the pipes were not insulated properly. And so as a result, they sweat. And it does two things. It will drip and stain ceiling tile. And then wherever that water falls, it could create an environment that's conducive to mold. Like I said, I have not heard anything from our facilities manager about needing additional remediation in terms of mold. I've not paid any bills to that extent since this particular invoice. So any detail, I'd have to go back to the facilities manager.
I'm just wondering if like the sweating pipes certainly sounds like a credible source of the mold. I'm just wondering if the pipes are now insulated, or if any work was done to address the water source for the mold.
I again would have to check with the facilities manager. I wouldn't be able to answer that directly.
Okay.
I know the company is a professional service provider in that regard, so I imagine that it was done to the standards necessary. But follow up, I haven't seen anything. Wayne, have you heard anything? If there's any additional, I mean, it seemed like this was identified and then completed by the service. I know in the past we've had some issues with the tiles where they weren't done by professional service provider, and that's where we ran into some of those Green Meadow issues where people were just taking the tiles that were fraying down and replacing them without, so I think this was the effort to have a professional vendor handle those efforts.
Right.
So do we know why the ceiling tiles were, or the ceiling needed to be repaired? Do we have a cause identified? What caused the damage, or what's causing the damage?
Again, I'd have to ask the facilities manager.
All right, that's fine. I think that's something to follow up with at a later time.
Anyone else on the FinCom have any questions regarding this reserve fund transfer?
I'm gonna have the same question I had on the last one about why this is broken into 3 pieces rather than, it all looks like it's on one invoice this time. So just understanding the quote bidding out process, if they were done at different times or.
On this invoice, let me see, I can't tell in the system. Yeah, on the invoice, I can't tell. I'd have to go back and check either the system or check with the facilities manager.
Yeah, they are on one invoice, and the Excel sheet has them all on 12/1 as input. I know that one, that isn't as accurate, but
Yeah, that's just when we put them in the system as we found out the other ones.
The transaction date is the same though, 11/26.
I'm sorry?
It looks like the transaction date is the same on all of them,
it's
November
on,
26th.
they're all on one invoice, yes.
Yeah.
We're all in one PO as well.
Making a
Yeah,
note.
so my understanding is that it's best practice to do a bid out process. I know for emergency work, sometimes that's not always possible.
Well, for something like this, for just over $10,000, you're not required to bid. You get 3 quotes.
Right, sorry. I guess I should be more specific then. Yeah, the 3 quote system. Were additional quotes generated, or this is a preferred vendor?
I'd have to get with a facility manager.
I have another question. That facilities manager, is that under the school department, or is that being managed by the town? Because I seem to recall like there was some division of work between school and town. So is that facility manager, is that under the town, or is that under the schools?
He's a school employee.
Okay.
So I'm making a note.
So
Any other-
just listening, I have a question, just a line of questioning, because I know this would have been good to get ahead of time, because I know Wayne would have, we've been able to check with Mr. Savoy to get some of this. Is that something that maybe we could put in the preamble? If that's a standing FinCom inquiry about, identify the bidders or whoever that might be, because I don't know if Wayne would ever necessarily know all of those. In some of these, efforts of who the director reached out to.
I would say it's standard for us to ask about proper, procurement.
Just so that we can provide that, like, be ready to, like, just to the point of making sure that the information is, easy to, to have that conversation handy for you all.
Yeah, I'm actually not so sure that it's typical for us to ask about, procurement. I think we assume that procurement laws in terms of bidding and stuff like that have been followed. I don't mind if, certainly we have reason to believe that that hasn't happened. I think that's, on behalf of town meeting voters, we would ask that kind of thing, but I think, we ought to focus our questions more on, is this in fact, an unusual, unforeseen and extraordinary expense that meets the definition for reserve fund transfers, and therefore that we would approve that. Just again, one person's
Yeah, so
perspective.
I would add, I guess, I don't think it's, possible to put in a form the questions we might ask.
Yeah.
And so in looking at this and some of the dates here, I guess I don't want to hold anything up. Overall, $27,000 isn't very much money. I think I'm going to vote to recommend or to approve all of these. But my overall thought in listening to the questions and the responses is it would have been better to do this in May. And then we could have said, okay, we'll wait 2 weeks until the next meeting. And then, have time to come back with answers to questions. I don't know that we're ever going to get the perfect form to say, this is everything you need. We get to ask whatever questions we want to ask. And I think, I'm just guessing somewhat, seeing the individual amounts that then add up to over 10,000, which triggers something, is a little bit what's prompting the questions. I think they, kind of are legit questions. So that, that's the other thing I would note is just the timing of this, doing this at the last possible meeting in July is part of the issue here.
Well, and in fairness, I mean, the reason why they're being at this meeting is because of our own meeting schedule. The purpose of reserve fund transfer, again, is for the town to be able to handle extraordinary and unforeseen expenses. And, the focus, should be, generally speaking, on, is this a legitimate expense that on behalf of town meeting voters is unforeseen, extraordinary, and therefore do we feel as though, we would go ahead and approve that? And we haven't been spending time talking about that. We've been spending time talking about, account numbers and, procurement law and things like that. Now, I'm not saying that, I agree with Peter. We can ask whatever questions that we feel are necessary in order to do town meeting voters, to represent the interest of town meeting voters. I'm not trying to argue that point. Just saying, generally speaking, we ought to be looking at whether this is, an unforeseen, extraordinary expense, and therefore, is a legitimate, coming to a reserve fund for a transfer is a legitimate, purpose of that.
Yeah, and the other thing having to do with the timing, I mean, some of these are quite old, and it does say that, if you need reserve fund money for these, that you come and get it before you pay the invoice, because you can't pay the invoice, and that's why you're using reserve fund. So the process is, not something the schools do or are used to. They're learning. But a lot of this process right now is a little bit off.
Can I ask a question along those lines? 'Cause I think
Yep.
some of the unforeseen or inability to pay was not known until after the winter passed. And so that's where some of this has come up, right? Due to the circumstances of paying some of the expenses that have just, kind of happened, and the funds have been depleted faster than they would have anticipated. So is that not a function or an ability that the attempt was there to try to, maintain it within the
No.
operating budget? Or
You raised a very good point, Natasha. If it's really that, you don't run out of money until June, and then you're kind of looking back saying, well, this really shouldn't have been there. We should have done reserve fund back then because it was kind of unexpected. Yeah, you raised a good point. I don't have a response to that, but I guess I'm more reacting that, we like to ask questions. It's hard to say what they're going to be. And so
I like that you ask
and I
questions.
get that.
I definitely like the questions and I just want to be cognizant of the time and, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
that we can
but
provide you the
raise a good point
information.
That we would prefer that this come out of some, some previously authorized budget if possible. And maybe you
And
don't
that's, I
know
think
it's
the
not
attempt
possible
was,
until June.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
No, and
Very good
that's,
point to raise.
it is a good point. And I think, moving forward, and I'm not saying that we've never okayed reserve fund transfers after invoices have been paid. I mean, that's the general way and what the form, come and get it so that you can pay this bill. Does it always work out that way? No. And I think moving forward, should you have something unforeseen emergency that you can then project and say, I don't think we can, this account is going to be drained if we pay for this and we got to go the rest of the school year, then you can come and ask for a reserve fund at any time during the year. It doesn't have to be, the 11th hour at the end of the year.
so to Ken's question about, does anyone have a question about the validity of these being unforeseen and emergency, which is what the intent of the requests are?
I offer 2 cents here. I used
Sure.
to be on the finance committee back in the late 60s and early 70s, which is a ways ago. But that was one of the functions of the liaison, is that in December, somebody would say, we had an unforeseen situation. They would tell the liaison to the finance committee liaison would come back to the finance committee and say, there's a possibility in June, we're going to have to pay for some things. There were some items that have cropped up. They might be able to cover it in the budget, they might not, but we won't know until June. But at least the finance committee has some warning. They know what it is in a timely fashion. And so when June comes, then they don't have all these questions because they've already been made aware that there was this problem in December and there was this additional problem in February that represented $20,000 or something. So just put a marker in on the reserve fund. We're hoping that we don't have to use it, but just be aware. And that was.
I also wanted to add, thank you for kind of bringing it this, the school department and through the school committee and the town budget subcommittee did bring the issue of the depletion of the facilities revolver account as a point of discussion. And we did attempt to seek through ARPA funds relief for a lot of these expenses, and we were denied. So there were conversations leading up to, again, look at an alternate path, whether it's through our own budget, as there were loss of revenue through the facilities funds, that ultimately this was mentioned kind of like, hey, then try this. And that's the direction where the school department now finds us. So I just, there were conversations since December about this, and I just want to kind of put the record out there that it wasn't a sudden decision that came about.
Yes, that's correct.
Do we have any other questions or discussion on this one before I will entertain a motion? No?
Okay. I'd move to approve the reserve fund transfer of 11,100 to the appropriate school general fund line.
All right, do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Katie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. All right, and our last one here. This one is plumbing and heating. Oh, grease interceptor. Is that in the
We had to go back and ask,
dining?
actually it was, yeah, because we actually had a timely presentation from our facilities director and asked during one of the school committee meetings. And yes, that was, I think we tried to expand on it in the description towards that But yes, it's a grease trap
Oh, okay, here we go.
in the Fowler's kitchen that posed an immediate safety issue.
Yeah, the grease traps are highly regulated things, having worked in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, and the health department can flag you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the invoice lacked context, so that's where we needed to get a little bit more information on that.
I'll just pop that up here. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, that looks like a contractor. Service. Thank you very much.
So again, just to facilitate the conversation, this is unforeseen clearly. It's also extraordinary in the sense that, as the reserve fund transfer said, their operating budget, given the fact that there is not the income from the facilities use, is not funded sufficiently to cover all these expenses, hence why they're looking for coverage under the reserve fund transfer.
Mhm. Any other questions on this one? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve the reserve fund transfer for $5,500 to the appropriate school general fund.
Okay, do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
All right, and roll call vote. Katie,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. All right. Thank you, Wayne and Natasha, for being here. And so I will go ahead and sign those. Lori, I'll bring them to you in the town hall.
Yes, please.
Yep, okay, I will do that.
But knowing they are voted, I will transfer the funds in the morning.
Okay.
So Wayne can do whatever he needs to do to balance out at the end of the year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do
FinCom.
we need to get them, Lori, corrected with, like, can I sign them and just write general fund where it
Yes.
says, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. I know you,
Okay.
I know I was here. I know you voted it. That is perfectly fine.
Just didn't know if I needed a corrected one, if that's sufficient.
Yeah,
Great.
that will be sufficient.
Great.
Just
Wayne, thank
proofs the
you.
forms to make sure that she doesn't sneak in a few extra dollars for
I'll check that.
FinCom salaries or something.
Bonuses, end of year
And just
bonuses.
before I go,
Yeah.
if I may, I just want to
Yep.
say, appreciate your support in doing this. On behalf of Brian, we really appreciate it. It was a tough year for our revolving account. We had these things that happened, and really appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate you being here tonight and learning some new things together. So thank you very much. All right, moving on. Budget transfers from Lori. And I do want to say to Dick's point about reserve fund transfer discussions happening ahead of time. Greg, I do appreciate when you and I have discussed when you've come forward and said, hey, just so you know, there may be this coming down the pipeline. I know the library one and whatnot we had talked about. So it's definitely helpful and, good to know. And hopefully we can always be helpful when needed. All right, let me share the Excel for the budget transfer. So those on the FinCom that this is your first season for this, I guess, and also anyone else, just a point of education. So the budget transfers are a little different. They don't each have their own individual form. These are not coming from a separate fund. These are funds that are getting transferred between departments.
Within the general fund, within the
Correct.
general town budget. Could you bump that up just a little bit in size?
Make it a
please?
little bigger, absolutely. That's,
Just a little bit would be good. Thank you.
is that better? So Lori, do you want to go through these quickly? Do you have any,
Sure, most of the, I mean, a lot of the transfers that we're doing this year are due to the ratification of the clerical union contract after the budget was set. And we
Okay.
didn't know what was needed. So that's what most of these are. We're transferring from health insurance. Others are just, there's a few that are basically swapping within the same department. Typically, we hold departments to salaries and expenditure amounts that are voted in the omnibus budget. I know we vote by category, but we present an omnibus budget, and typically most towns hold their departments to that. So basically, when we transfer from, say, salaries to expenses, they might be over in one category and under in another. We just transfer, such as the police, town clerk, that sort of thing. Transferring those from one to the other for transparency, just so everybody, sees that. A couple departments went over, fire. I talked to the chief. Most all of his salaries that were wages that were over were due to illnesses and injuries on duty that required other officers to work outside of their normal classification. So working in a higher classification, everybody gets bumped up, as he explained to me. So everybody is working in that higher classification and receives a higher pay. So that's where his overage came from. He's fine. DPW, they were mostly clerical union contracts. There was a little working out of classification in the director position. Only a small amount. And then they went over a little bit in their engineering services that were needed. They have multiple projects going on, multiple grants that they're working on. Typically, library has been typically is a little under budgeted this year due to it's had some repair and maintenance building issues that were not taken care of by reserve funds. Their heat, obviously, with inflation, costs of gas, electricity, everything has gone sky high. So they're a little bit over there. Snow and ice went above and beyond what we had voted at town meeting. We knew this when we went there. We knew we were going to have some additional funds left in the health insurance that we would be able to cover that cost. We received a health insurance holiday from Maya for the employees and the town, which saved the town 1 full month's worth of premiums. So we knew we would have that available to transfer there. That's why we didn't change anything for town meeting. Any questions?
Okay.
So one question I have, so on the town clerk, obviously we have a reduction in salary
Mhm.
and an increase in consulting services because of, because the town clerk departure and therefore needing to pick up consulting services. That's correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then on the police, we had 50,000. So obviously, the salary budget is over 50,000. How
Yes,
is it that we ended up with 50,000 in the salary budget that could be transferred over? I mean, I'm really happy,
mean 80?
obviously. I'm sorry, yes, 80.
Yeah, he was understaffed this year. He budgets for a full staff, but he was not, operating at full staff this year. Next year he will be. So this
so-
year he
So that's
wanted
how
to use some of
he
that
ended up,
savings.
he ended up with the money to allow him to do the equipment upgrade.
Yes, there was some equipment, defibrillators as well as the
Right.
cameras, and
All
a
right.
few things were running over budget, like I said, due to inflation.
Yeah.
So he will
Thank
still
you.
be giving back money as well.
No, thanks. That's, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, and I did, on Friday, the 8th, I did forward you his, there was an email from the chief about, I think I put that on board docs too, that email about this particular.
Sorry if I missed this one. It looks like everything else has notes or explanations through email, or Lori, you went through them, but what was the data processing for 18 grand?
Just basically running over in a few computers that needed to be replaced that were not planned for, things costing more than they were when we budgeted, basically.
IT is I'm chiming. Lori did fantastic, by the way. I had notes ready, and I'm only here for moral support for her,
Because I live this.
but I will add, because I'm the sucker that does sign these checks. So the data processing is just as Lori mentioned, but it's a lot of unknown asset replacement. In other words, even like 2 years ago, I dropped the Surface I'm talking to you now, and that's like $2,000 a pop. So like when it's IT is one of our, obviously, like it's like it has to happen for modern business of any sort, like whether it be government or otherwise. You all know how Reliance, as we're talking to each other right now, like it's I sign it because I have no choice in order to like keep the town moving. But it's one of those really tricky things to budget for. So besides capital, like we have server replacement, some website replacement, and certain like licensing and software that we know that we have to do. Otherwise, it's kind of a crapshoot every year about how much stuff is going to fall. We do have an asset replacement schedule. So a couple years ago, Mike Guzzo sat down with the Drive Tech to say like, okay, so we have these many assets, and by assets I mean computers and servers and monitors, and then we know, okay, so these are 5 years old, and that's about the life expectancy or so, like until it's time to update. And then we try to do that schedule, but it's not perfect, as you can see. And because I don't have an IT staff, I have to contract out, and so I'm paying hourly rates for all that work. So it just adds up.
Do we need to have a special line item for town administrator equipment droppage?
No, I did it once, and I was so embarrassed that and then when I saw
I'm shocked you owned up to it here on tape, no less.
because that's fair. That I put myself out there, but like I slipped on the ice in my driveway in front of my kids, and they said nothing, and then I stood up and I looked at the Surface, and there's a big crack across it.
Oh.
So it's not really droppage.
I mean, something dropped, and it was.
You're right, but it's not droppage. I mean,
it was my pride.
Droppage is, you were using it as a doorstop and it fell over or something.
It didn't cushion my fall, but but no, it's a good
I
question.
don't think a Surface would cushion your fall very much.
No,
anyway.
it did not. But no, data processing is one of those things. It is surprising how quickly it adds up.
I think you
So
ought
it's
to
really
do,
general IT support. It's not just
Yeah, that's just the
data
title of the
processing.
account.
Is right, the title of the account, but it's really our IT support.
That's right.
I think we ought to do a study with other towns to see whether town administrators there drop their stuff.
Wait, there's no physical examination to be the TA. I think I would do okay, but I don't know. Actually, there's a lot of there's even younger TAs than I am out there, so who knows? So, yeah.
All right, I won't teach
right.
anymore.
Any other questions on?
Are we approve? Do we approve these, or what's the verb?
You do. I need approval from
Yes.
both.
Yeah. So I make a motion. We approve the budget transfer, end of year budget transfers.
Do I have a second?
A second.
I'll second. This
Okay.
is Peter. Oh, sorry.
Oh, Danielle
Sorry,
got it.
Okay,
And
Danielle
is there
got it.
any further questions or discussions? All right, then I will do a roll call vote. Ken,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. Thank you very much, Lori
Thank
and
you.
Greg.
No, good job, Lori. Thank you, Alana,
Thank you.
for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. All right, so that moves us on to our routine items. So I'm gonna pull up the minutes from our last meeting. We'll do that first. Thank you, Katie.
The only thing I was unsure of, I
Okay,
feel I wanted to make sure that the budget transfer numbers are correct.
oh, okay.
Just point
Yeah.
of order. Do we need Lori anymore?
I don't think so.
Not that I want to see her go, but
No, I think town staff, please.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Lori.
All right, thank you. Bye. Have a good night.
You too. So the reserve fund numbers, is that what you were looking at?
Correct. Yep. I think we only had one transfer last meeting.
yeah, customarily, we have in the past just used this as a reminder monthly about the status of the reserve fund. So we put the allocation at the top, whatever transfers are, what they were and the date, so that we, just as a reminder, and then what the balance is. So when we see, an amount there, seeing them, it's like, oh, we paid this, we paid this, we paid this. Oh, this hasn't hit yet or whatever.
And I believe the 9870 was the only one we approved last meeting.
There was another one, I believe, for 70,000 for fuel.
Ah, all right.
Yeah, and again, I think this is the reason why listing them individually, the transfers and the amount of
Yeah.
days is helpful to, it's like, okay, these are the ones we have listed. Oh, why don't we have?
Yeah,
this
we
one
actually, we did a batch of them. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna forward, this is all in a batch form for you, Katie, and I
Okay,
will
thank
email
you.
them to you and you can use this to list them out
All right, sounds good.
for us moving forward.
So then we can maybe vote on an amended, that part of it, but
Yes, yep.
okay.
Is there anything that impacts the balance other than the initial allocation and the transfers? Like if you take the initial balance minus the transfers, should that be the
Yes.
last line? Okay.
Yes, that is correct. It is.
So actually, so technically, yes, that's true. I would say in that we had a town meeting vote that plussed up the reserve fund in the year when a
Right.
whole bunch of school expenses were being paid. And what our recommendation to town meeting was, since we don't know what these expenses are, then if you want to put some oversight on that, then putting them in the reserve fund would allow that. But that was a singular event more normally. And by the way, I would not necessarily hold up the approval of these if we're ready to approve them. I'm just saying in the future, it would be good to have.
Oh,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, any further discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Sorry, are we potentially voting on this as is? I'd be comfortable voting on it without the information at the bottom, but if the information at the bottom is incorrect, I'd rather either replace it or remove it and add it next time.
Yeah, what we can do is move to approve them as amended. And that amending is going to be putting in the correct reserve fund transfer amounts.
Okay, thank you.
So I will make a motion to approve, if I'm allowed to, the minutes for June 13th as amended for the reserve fund transfers.
And I'll
Correct.
second that.
Excellent. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Ken,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Danielle,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. All right. So update from chair and members. I think mostly I'm going to talk in the next bullet point about upcoming meetings and FY23. So I don't think I have any other specific updates. Do any other members have updates?
I had a Green Meadow building meeting after our last meeting, and I did raise, I don't know if anyone else watched that meeting or attended it, but I did raise the question about why the combination of the Fowler and the Green Meadow wasn't, brought forward as an option to the MSBA. And, it's kind of almost impossible at this point because we'd have to scratch the whole project and re-present to them. And it stirred a little drama. And there's a few emails that came from it that I'd be happy to forward to you guys. But basically it just, it was not an option to begin with. So it just was not on the table. But I'll be happy to forward communications on that. I don't know how much I should go into discussion of that, but I feel it stirred a lot of emotions within committee members and who have been planning it for a long time. And Ken, you might have questions on this.
Yeah, so look, as somebody who has been involved with planning projects over the long term and had people come in rather late and given advice, so that certainly has happened to me. I think first off, if you're going to be serving in this capacity, you have to have a bit of a thicker skin to be willing to take that on. It is a normal pace of dialogue to have people come in at the last minute and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
My point at the last meeting was not to put in these questions at the last minute.
Right.
My question was, these were issues that were raised a long time ago. And with members of the select board and members of the town administration being involved with this, the fact that the idea of working to, and now I'm not saying combine, because I understand that, at some point when we identified, hey, look, one option might be to combine them. It was stated that we couldn't do that with derailing the whole process.
Right.
If that's the case, and let's acknowledge that's the case, there are ways of combining the campuses or making the campuses adjoining more and putting them in closer proximity and not putting road in between them would be one way of doing that. And so if somehow the message was conveyed to the committee that we should just scrap the whole plans, that was certainly not the intent of my comment.
Right.
What my comment is that, in my opinion, these were issues that were raised very early on, that with Green Meadow having elementary school, being an elementary school, and the Fowler School not being a middle school, it is a combination school of elementary and middle school grades, that correct utilization or more efficient utilization of resources would be enhanced by making travel between those schools easier, making them making them closer would be one way. Eliminating a drive in between would be another way. Creating walkways that combine the two campuses would be one way. There were lots of ways to do this, and this factor, although identified early on, seems not to have been influenced the planning process. And so I'm just asking, how could that be? How could it be that several members of the community talk about the more efficient use of resources by combining these two campuses, or making them adjoining, or making communications and transition of resources from one to another easier, would enhance. And this is good use of resources. It's also efficient use of resources towards the education of our children, for goodness sakes. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I am disappointed to hear that the feedback was somehow interpreted as being an attack on them, as opposed to, well, geez, maybe we ought to step back and look at ways that we could, even at this late juncture, combine these two. Now, I will say, I don't have any kids in the elementary school. So I guess I'll leave it to other parents 5 years from now to sit there and bring up, why aren't these two schools in closer proximity where they could combine those? But I threw it out there. It seems to have been interpreted as an attack on the work of the committee, when it was really intended as a suggestion that maybe we take a look at the current plans and see which ones could do that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
There was some like unmuted moments on accident by members on that just got, an apology emails came, but the biggest thing was, so in an email, which I'll forward to everyone tonight, it was more discussing how pre-K to 8 buildings are a unique educational model that has some benefits, but also challenges. And then it goes on to say how that it was just not one that they
So see, this is exactly what I'm saying. Nobody is suggesting a pre-K to 8 building.
Right.
What we're suggesting is that the buildings be connected better than they currently are, in a way that because for years now, going back to when I was on school committee, we talked about, there was talk about how we had to have resources both at Fowler and at the elementary school, because they're 2 different buildings. And I'm just sitting here going, really? We're talking about 2 buildings that are close to one another. We should be able to have resources at the elementary level that would be able to be used in both buildings. But apparently that was a bridge too far. So that's the purpose behind it. So if I sound a little frustrated, it is because we've been talking about this so long. This is something that was identified a long time ago, and yet still it's getting interpreted as an attack rather than what I see as a reasonable suggestion to look at that. And with the surety that 5 years from now, somebody is going to be sitting there going, boy, it would have been nice if these 2 buildings were a little closer proximity and not have a road in between them.
So I've been involved in Green Meadow a lot, and I pretty much asked that very same question, Ken, that you asked, or that this committee raised, right during the year when we had that roof collapse. I was like, why don't we, when we get the new building, why don't we put them together? I actually thought they would do one building and maybe save a building principal. But I heard a very good explanation for why that is. While on the face of it seems like a good idea, like you're able to cut out like one principal, really it's not an efficient way to have the school run, specifically because there are young kids in Green Meadow preschool even, and you have 13.
And respectfully, I never talked about a principal. Okay,
well,
I talked about school resources that are used for the kids. So we're talking about literacy resources, we're talking about guidance counselors, we're not talking about a principal.
Yeah.
And when you've got a guidance counselor over in one building who can't visit the other one because it's, seemingly, I guess, 100 miles away, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, it's a fantastic idea. I'm just saying, I don't recall exactly who this conversation with. I believe it was with a member of the school committee, and we were talking about this, but they gave a very good explanation for why this would not be considered. I would probably suggest reaching out to them, but
I don't need to reach out to them. I was on school committee. We had this discussion when I was on school committee. Now I'm on FinCom. We're still having this discussion. As I said, if nobody else is worried about it, if nobody else thinks it's an issue, then, I'm in the end, I'm okay with it. But
Jillian, did you have, I saw your hand raised for a second.
I just wanted to say I appreciate we're all very passionate on this topic. I just want to make sure we don't go down a rabbit hole. That doesn't have to do with the finance committee tonight.
good point. Any other updates from other members concerning? Ken, you have
Yeah.
one? Go ahead.
Yeah, so, as if I, apparently haven't started enough controversy talking about the Green Meadow School, I would sit there and say that the art space lease is up for renewal. And, I realize that it is the prerogative of the town to renew that. However, again, this is something that was discussed previously. The use of that space and the subsidy that the town provides to the community that uses that space should be, and just, in my view as one member, something that town meeting voters be aware of. There are other uses for that space. And I'm not suggesting that we should use it differently. What I'm saying is that I think rather than just automatically renewing it, this ought to be something that is part of a discussion across the community about whether the town is going to continue to subsidize the operation of art space into the next lease. And quite frankly, this is something that last time we did the lease, it didn't get looked at. We're in the process of renewing the lease again, still not getting looked at. And just on behalf of town meeting voters, I think town meeting voters ought to know that their tax dollars are going to subsidize art space. And so I'll throw that one out there as well. And so I guess I got a trifecta now of having suggested that we end football at Maynard High School and art space, or at least review art space, and maybe, combine Green Meadow and the Fowler School.
You might as well just go for it all. Yeah, just go
Three's
there.
enough.
There you go. All right.
I'm just saying on behalf of town meeting voters, I
Yep.
think that these things shouldn't just be, gliding through. And we have a
Yep.
role as a finance committee to sit there and ask the questions. And yet, and yet that's not happening.
We're getting
Yeah.
ready for football.
Yep.
That's an old one. That's an old
That's
one.
an old one.
Dick, go ahead.
I was on FinCom at that time, Natasha.
I remember
Totally
it.
agree. Totally agree with Ken. Have mentioned this to several people previously, that art space is not maintaining the building well, that they need to updo it. And the situation now is different than it was in the beginning. There's a waiting list for people who are trying to get in. And so I'm sure that they can bump up their rentals a little bit and put some effort into maintaining those buildings better.
Oh, I would go so far as to say, I think there are alternative uses for that building that would bring in revenue to the town. That's what we ought to be looking at. It's not just a matter of rentals being low. What I'm suggesting is there are alternative uses for that space, and we ought to be looking at ways to generate that revenue when we have schools that need money, when we have potholes, when we have water and sewer system that needs infrastructure repairs. I just, I don't know why we don't, look at these as a community, why we don't look at these more closely.
Greg, can you go over a little bit the legality side of that art space lease, as in like it's, who just so everyone, is aware, who has the authority over it, what the process is happening.
Sure.
Just so we have a little background to this discussion.
I can give you a little background, and then I'll tell you why I can't give much more in a minute. So the town, I'm sorry. So the town does own it. So it's the old Fowler School, and then I don't know, however many, more than 20 years ago, it was provided to Art Space as a nonprofit for artist studios, primarily, some exhibits, etc. There was a gymnasium at one time, and that was destroyed. So Ken is correct. So they, as a nonprofit, they don't pay taxes so much as like a private would, but they do provide arguably in-kind services, although that's not exactly the same. The town does not do the maintenance, as our lease agreement requires ArtSpace to do the maintenance. But we are their landlord, so we do look out for them from time to time. So when their basement flooded, myself and Aaron McCloskey were down there trying to, and Aaron was figuring it out. And then we helped them abate. Actually, what happened was that, this is just a point of example, that their first floor did flood. The Acme Theater did flood as well, bottom floor. And then we found out that when you do that, there was asbestos, of course, in the tiling, because it's that age of the building. And so and the adhesiveness of the tiling. So we ended up having to abate that. So we do have a partnership with them, but otherwise on a regular basis, we do plowing. We'll do a quick plow through their driveways, but we usually stay out of ArtSpace, and even ArtSpace pays their portion of the liability insurance premium, which is not nothing. I think it's like $8,000 or $9,000 a year. And then they provide their own insurance coverage as well. So Ken is right that the lease was up, and in fact we gave them a year or two of extensions as well. And then we
Due to COVID, correct? I mean, my recollection, it had mostly.
They
to
weren't
do-
ready to the BO,
Right.
the select board wanted more time, and
That's correct. So the
we
board
just,
is not trying to I think maybe there could be a question of urgency. Like, did we need to sort of like expedite the lease, the conclusion of the lease, or could we continue it? And because it is owned already by the town, we didn't have to go through town meeting to lease that property. But you do have to go through proper procurement. So I'll get to that now. So now the board did give direction to me to execute a procurement process, which is a request for proposals. And I've already, that was made public. I did get one submission. Guess what? ArtSpace. And then I'm actually reviewing it still. And then if ArtSpace is successful in their submission, we'll go into contracting and negotiation with them. But I can't really go beyond that because I've had multiple executive sessions with the select board. So I can't get into like the reasons why the select board gave me the direction they gave me, their intentions, what they'd like to see out of it, et cetera. But you could see the request for proposals and sort of like, reflect on that as to what direction I was given. And then you'll see what's negotiated. And if whatever is negotiated between myself as an agent of the select board and ArtSpace, and if it goes to the board and the board likes it, then we'll see what is going to go forward. I think I can say that the board shares a lot of the similar concerns. Maintenance of the building, it's an amenity, it's an asset. So similar to like a golf course, like we're providing it as an amenity to the town. That the town is not. Like I'm not running any artist studios. The library is not running artist studios. Like this is a character of Maynard that the select board recognizes as unique and attractive, and we're trying to preserve that. But the board is also sensitive to not doing it at a certain cost to the town that is like untenable.
But the town is also, the select board is also not looking at alternative uses. RFP goes out for lease of the property, but not sale of the property. And so the
true.
other revenue generating uses of that property are not being looked at. And again,
I can't speak to that because I can't speak to what the board considered in their executive session. But
well, I'm not asking you to. What I'm saying is, that, and I guess you could count the golf course as my fourth project, since I had suggested we sell lots on the golf course. But this is the kind of thing that, to me, we ought to be, as town leaders, be stepping back collectively to look at, and yet, we're not, so.
and so Greg, so just to clarify, you put out an RFP, but it's all right that only one Like, you don't have to make sure you get like 3 back before
Oh,
you
no,
move
I
forward.
don't. I don't.
Okay.
I just have to make it be an open process, which it was.
Okay,
And,
so it just has to be an open process, but you don't have to show like,
no, I could,
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, I don't have to. I have to
Okay.
show that like it was a fair and open process, and it was.
Okay.
And so far, no one's calling the Inspector General's office on me, so I think it's okay. But
yeah, no, I wasn't sure if
could-
there was a requirement to have more than one.
No,
Before
unless
you
the
move
board
forward.
says they wanted to see more. So like,
see.
or if I did, if I felt like I wasn't getting acceptable sort of submissions, or if I want to reject for any reason, then I could, and I don't have to do the process again, because the contract, our current extension ends December 31st, 2022. So technically there's 5 months left, on the contract, but the board, at the request of ArtSpace, wanted the procurement process expedited. So yeah.
And so the lease process and redoing this lease is fully within the select board's,
Yes, it's town-owned property. Yes.
correct. What action would necessitate a town meeting vote on this? Would it be a sale?
Yes, so the disposition of property, which is a sale.
Okay, right.
So, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, but any lease, basically any lease is good to go.
No, I believe if
From
we
them.
wanted to lease property of a certain value, maybe we'd have to go to town meeting, but we own the asset.
Right,
So, right,
Okay.
right, you can do the procurement process, yeah.
thanks.
That's all I
Um,
had on that.
Okay,
I was just wondering, did you have any inquiry for Greg? Did you
Yeah.
have any inquiries regarding your RFP? I know you had one submission, which was ArtSpace, but did you have any inquiries?
Oh, good question. No, I don't think I did. I mean, it's a beast to, if you want to like take, because again, the RFP was to lease it, and I'm sure there would be a bunch of hungry developers. I could probably count on my hand who they would be. I'm sure all of us kind of know who they are. They own most of the buildings in Maynard, but like or a lot of like the renovation projects. So I'm sure they were all salivating when they knew that the lease agreement was coming due. But I took direction of the board, so we went with the lease.
Do you know what our commercial space vacancy rate is currently?
No, not off the top of my head, no. But the Economic Development Committee has considered that, and the EDC has recommended town administration look into a vacant property task force, which is a good idea, and a lot of municipalities do that. It obviously requires a certain amount of time and resources that I don't have on hand. So, but no, it's a good question, and obviously I'm very interested in that too. Although I am curious, like ArtSpace is not vacant, so it's not.
No, but
Well-
there are lots of places downtown that are vacant and where you
Right.
could have these places go. And therefore free up the building to be sold, for residential, which is, quite frankly, another problem of, having, adequate residential base would be something that would also be, having more living spaces would be good, and having more tax revenue would be good.
That's true, and of course I'm responsible for the bottom line in the town, and of course I'm very aware, as the finance committee is too, about our struggles. I only to speak on that point really quick about the sort of like what alternatives there may be to 61 Summer Street, which is the old Fowler School. It seems like the Mill is probably the only other place that could handle just as many studios. I don't remember off the top of my head how many studios are right now in ArtSpace. There's a lot. And so I don't foresee something downtown having that capacity, but maybe the Mill, but that's privately owned, and I don't know their palette for
right.
artist studios, nonprofit.
So that's a whole nother thing, where ArtSpace decides to go and whether they go into the Mill or someplace else, that's up to ArtSpace to decide.
Sure.
It's not in, I don't believe, I mean, maybe the select board feels this way, but I don't believe it's the select board's responsibility to find a location for art space.
Sure.
It is a responsibility, in my opinion, for them to sit there and look at the utilization of town property. And when you have essentially a town property being released being essentially the town subsidizing the releasing of a
Right.
town property,
Right.
without looking at alternatives, I don't think that's I don't think we're carrying out our responsibilities to town meeting voters.
This goes back quite a ways, but I think there was a town meeting vote where they chose not to sell it and to lease it and maintain it and to give it to art space. So I think that there is actually on record somewhere that the town chose
Oh,
to
that's interesting.
take that approach.
So
Well,
would
and-
we
and
have to
maybe-
revote? to se-
Maybe if the town saw, we had this whole conversation about the school budget and how we don't have funds for the school budget. Okay, and I'm guessing if we went to town meeting voters and said, hey, here is a way for us to stop paying for art space and rather than subsidizing art space, okay, we sell that building, start generating tax revenues and see, what the impact of that is on the, on the town finances.
we do
so-
tend to like to keep our like the golf course and this building, and for a long time, the other old school Coolidge.
Yeah, but I'm gonna
and-
sell the old fire station. So
Please sell the fire station for
the-
the love of.
that's my plan, is to sell the old fire station. So
But
So
that-
all joking aside,
Yeah.
Coolidge is not yet being utilized.
right,
Okay, we're
Right.
still waiting on that to happen.
that's right.
And I don't understand why this town is keeping these buildings rather than allowing them to be sold and become revenue generating
Well,
when
so
we have so many financial needs.
and the fire station needs some remediation before we can even sell that property. But is the art space building in the same boat, or would that be a much more lucrative? Because Coolidge was this is the thing, right? Coolidge, we couldn't get a lot of money for. I'm happy it's going. I think it's great, wonderful. But that wasn't a property where we were, and we're gonna obviously it increases the tax base and people, and it's all good, but it's not a property that it's like, oh, we made $2 million selling that because it was prime real estate.
No, we did, it was limited because the lot was limited.
Right.
And there were limited number of property of units that could go in there.
Yep.
That is not true of art space. Now, I'm
Mhm.
not suggesting we turn art space into apartments. What I'm saying is that the town is not even being given the opportunity to, town meeting voters are not being given the opportunity to weigh in on that and say, when we have potholes, when we can't fund our schools fully, when we have water and sewer, maybe we need to think about that. We're not even doing that. We're just automatically allowing it and subsidizing the
Right.
current leaseholder in their operations.
Well, my question about its value to the town is because I feel like it would be a very interesting and probably very productive conversation should it be something that we could really make quite a bit of money on. However, if it's the kind of thing like Coolidge or like other properties where it's really not going to, we're not going to fix the school budget with what we could get out of it, I'm virtually certain the feeling behind it is going to be, keep art space, because I do believe it is a beloved institution. So I'm just curious
I'm
if
not so
there's
sure
any
it is
idea.
I'm not so sure it is a beloved institution. I think there are some people in this town who like art space. I think there are other people in this town who like lower taxes and a fully funded school. And if you were to say to
Fair.
a lot of school parents with school-age children, hey, this would generate X amount, but we don't know how much taxes it would generate because we've never asked that question. So I'm not saying that this leash should be stopped, okay? What I'm saying is at some point, the town needs to sit there and say, we're going to take a look at this building and we may decide that there are other uses to it. Okay, and we don't have to lease it out for, you know, for a zillion years and allow it to go. So I'm done.
So is that something that the assessors could give you a quick economic report that would talk about the potential sales price and the potential revenue? And if it were put into residential, what kind of residential would be and what would affect the population of the schools?
Yeah,
See if there's a net benefit or not.
with Coolidge, we went out to somebody and somebody with that specialty and had them provide an estimate. It was not the assessor's office that did.
It was not. It's a private appraisal, and I did do that. And I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. But
with art space?
I did. And I think that's public document. I'm trying to think if it's executive at this time. I'll find out. And if it's
Okay.
public, I'll share
If
it
it's
with the
public, yeah,
finance
please send it.
So, you know, my job is to advise primarily the select board, other bodies as well, but primarily I am an agent of the select board. And for what it's worth, I will say that they, but I can't speak to their deliberation because I was in executive session. I'm just saying that they have similar sensitivities that you're bringing up, Ken. So I will look into see if I can provide that appraisal, which the board has seen. So, and I can, but a lot of the things that Alana brought up, and you can look at the select board meetings and how many letters they got from art space supporters and state delegates are big fans. You know, like the select board tried to weigh all that. That I can say. Like they tried to be collective in their view and their perspective of the value and the amenity of art space and its future potential or alternative potentials.
But they didn't go out to parents of school-age children in a year when we didn't fully fund what the schools asked for and say to them, hey, look, we've done this estimate on, you know, what we might sell this building for and what it might generate. And so what do you all think about that? Because I'm guessing if you did, you'd have probably an awful lot of letters from people who would say, yeah, I'd like to see additional revenue. I'd like to see, the town stop subsidizing art space and start to generate revenue and use that revenue for schools, potholes, or whatever. And I'm shocked to find that document, that estimate was done. And so I'm shocked. Disappointed.
So I do have another question for Greg. Can we add to the residential population now, or are we still bottlenecked by the water supply?
Oh, that's relative. So we can always add to the. I mean, babies are getting born every day. But I think you asked a fair question, and I would say this is my subjective opinion. We are concerningly close to the maximizing our water supply in particular. However, that's not to say that we couldn't handle a certain amount of additional residential. But that is.
And it's also to say that we could go out to those who are developing that property and have them pay for mitigations to the water and sewer system.
That's potentially true, but it is I mean, that's relative to the cost of the additional, which we are working on. Like we are tapping into the new well field, but as well as the treatment required to compensate for that extra capacity. I don't know how many units you could fit into art space, but if it may not even be art space. If I put a for sale sign on the front of art space, would it look like art space? Maybe not. I bet there's a couple developers that would just bulldoze that bad boy and then pop up as many townhomes as they could. So I don't know if that's what would be feasible or even palatable to like the planning board and whatnot, who does in their procedures does require a review for water sewer capabilities now, because the planning board is also sensitive to that point. But I have other sort of like on the horizon concerns that, and so does the planning board and select board, of course, capital planning committee too. Like they think, everyone kind of thinks about all these things. What is the mill's occupancy right now? What's their potential? If the mill decided to start converting some of those spaces, I don't even know if it's possible, but to some lab spaces, which I know this body has brought up in the past, how much water does that take? The Chinese school, the potential Chinese school down the way. So if they ever come back and if they're able to start progress, that's going to be a drain.
That was a lot if they're going to be dorms. Yeah.
That's right. So like
that was a big one.
That's a good question, Kevin. And but I can't say whether
there isn't a simple answer is what he's trying to say.
No, but residential does use a lot. I mean, there's a lot of toilets get flushed and there's a lot of baths taken and laundry done like that.
Yeah.
That is a concern. But it's not to say we already looking at that. And a lot of that ARPA money, which was brought up earlier, is going towards those needs, not future needs, like current needs. So which if we don't address immediately, which we are addressing, but if we don't continue to address, then the answer will be a definitive no, if what potential growth we could have going down the line. But I think art space is probably a good example of one of the few remaining sort of like, I don't know if you call it major developments, but there's not going to be another like Maynard Crossing coming down the line. It's going to be these pockets of redevelopments of current spaces. So 115 Main Street, which is the old Gruber building, and the development of the corner of Powder Mill and Waltham, around Excelsior Comics. Somebody bought all that and they want to make it into stuff. So like if those sort of sites we can handle, like it's that, it's not all coming at once, it's going to come progressively and we can handle those. But these big sites like the Chinese school, we're concerned about that, but not in a bad way. Like I think it's a good thing to have, like that's a good problem to have, that you have people wanting to use your town, but it's a concern. That was a long answer for probably not.
I mean, I'm just speaking in my personal capacity because I really agree with Ken on the goal. I have questions about the timing, because if we look at the commercial vacancy rates, if we look at our residential expansion capacity, I don't know if we're going to have sufficient demand for where the space that art space is occupied. I don't know if we're going to have a door blazing demand for that space. Maybe for residential, if we can pull it, but commercial, we're looking at vacancy rates already in our downtown. We're looking at vacancies already in the downtown. I don't know if there's a market appetite for more commercial space in Maynard at the moment.
Well, maybe not, but it's zoned residential. It's outside the downtown.
It's zoned residential, but there's probably like an exception for for art space or something.
Yeah, there because it's town owned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be residential if it were sold. It would most likely be residential outside of zoning.
Unless we change the zoning. But yeah.
Okay. Peter, was there anything in the charter review recently? Have you guys had any meetings?
We did have a meeting there. I don't think there's anything that pertinent to FinCom.
Okay. All right. And Jillian, did you have anything from budget subcommittee you wanted to touch on, or?
No, I don't think we've had one since.
Yeah, I was gonna say it.
Meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, moving forward on our agenda, I want to talk a little bit about upcoming meeting schedule and our FY23 planning. One of the things that we need to talk about and that Dick mentioned is liaisons to other committees. This is something that we try to do. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be at every meeting of these committees, should you volunteer to be a liaison to them, but it just means, you check in, you maybe go to some meetings, you keep us informed if there's, pertinent things happening. And I found that they have been very helpful to us overall. As the chair, I would like to continue with the select board because that is a pretty important relationship between the two boards, and it just seems like a good fit. Unless anybody else is really jonesing to to be that, I would like to continue on with the select board. However, I've also been doing the community preservation committee, and I'm finding between two FinCom meetings, two select board meetings in the month, it's a little tough to also do the CPC. So I would love to have, if anybody is interested, and we don't have to do all these this evening, but if anybody's interested in being the CPC liaison, they meet Wednesday evenings twice a month generally. And they're just a very good one for us because of the, their monetary relationship and stuff, I would say. And the other one, we haven't really, now that the Capcom has really come together and been an actual, group that's doing a lot of work, I would love to have somebody liaisoning with the Capcom, because I feel like knowing what they're thinking and their plans is really good. That's something that we struggle with sometimes as a town, is planning our capital needs and whatnot. So I think having a liaison to them would be great. I don't think that's one we've had in the past. The school committee is one, I believe. Ken, you were the school committee, yep, for the past year. And the other, the budget subcommittee, we have 2 members on. And right now, the charter review committee, that one is not always active. That one is active right now because we are under a charter review that happens every 10 years. Is it, Dick? 10 years. Peter is on that currently. Elliot was on it. So we need to have somebody else step in for him on that committee. And we have Katie on the Green Meadow Building Committee, which again is not one that is always occurring. That's a special one. So I guess I'll start. Katie, are you comfortable staying on that committee for this next fiscal?
Unmute myself, sorry. I am. I feel
Okay.
it took me a bit to catch up and I'm
Okay,
slightly caught up, so I feel good with where I'm at.
great.
So yes.
Thank you.
Just as an FYI, you can use the space bar to turn on your microphone.
Learn something new every day.
And Ken, would you like to stay with school committee or would you like to switch it up?
He didn't spacebar.
I did spacebar, it didn't
Oh
do it.
no, maybe it's different operating system.
Yeah. So, I'm open to, either staying on or not staying on. Either way is fine. So,
Okay.
if somebody else, if my services, could be used elsewhere better, that'd be fine. If somebody else wants the school committee, that's fine too. So.
Does anybody want to step forward for school committee liaison? Okay, then I'm going to keep you on it, Ken. Thank you very much. Peter, are you okay staying on charter review?
Yes, that's fine. And given where we are in the process, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can I also just note, with 2 prospective members of the committee, I'm assuming we may have a new member appointed somewhat soon. I just wonder, maybe we talk about this without settling everything tonight,
Sure,
so
yeah,
that
absolutely.
there's some opportunity for new members.
That makes sense. Yep,
You'll have a new member before your next meeting.
great. So, okay, yeah, so those are, I think I touched on the big ones. Did I miss anything?
So the one that we've not often had is someone to interact with, like the town planner about upcoming development projects. That that obviously has a direct impact on on what revenues are coming in. So understanding different development projects. I think Jill was on the Economic Development Committee, or supported that at one point. I don't know if she still is, but that's another
Yep.
another one. The last one. So there's a master plan implementation committee that Jason Creel is chairing, and since the implementation obviously has a significant amount of funding impacts, then that would be another one that would be good.
Okay. So I'm gonna
And
write
then-
these all up and I will send them so people can just look at them again and maybe check their meeting schedules when they, because like, for instance, the Economic Development Committee, I think, meets at 8 a.m. on Wednesdays or something. So there may be some that are just out for people, like not really. And again, not that you have to go to all of their meetings, but it's usually good that you could at some point. Go ahead, Peter.
And then, sorry, just to note, that we didn't talk about budget subcommittee either.
Yep, I have that on my list. So I may not have said it
Yeah,
out loud, but I do have that on my
okay.
list.
So is there a need for 2 people on that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's, again, that's not a charter mandated like the way we've set it up. That's what we do. We do 2 for FinCom, 2 for school committee, 2 from select board, and then Greg and others. But yeah, so yes, but it's not one that, should there be an issue for a little while or whatnot, that we're out of some sort of legal problem.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Great. So yeah, I'll write these up and send them in an email, and you all can think about them. And when we have our full committee, we will try to divvy these up and make sure we've got bases covered and whatnot at our next meeting. Okay. So speaking of our next meeting, that would be Monday, July 25th is our next scheduled meeting. In terms of agenda items, I'm trying to think of what we should I know we're in a window of time between annual town meeting and when we start planning fall town meeting, right, Greg? We're gonna have a fall town meeting probably. So this is the time at which we can do some things that we don't have time for when we're preparing for budgets or town meetings. So it's fall town meeting time, then it'll be budget season, then it'll be annual town meeting. As soon as, September, it's like take off. So in these couple of summer meetings that we have is the time to do some things that we maybe don't always have time to. So I'm open to some suggestions of things that you might want to have us look at, if you have any. Otherwise, I'll make some up. I know there was a desire to try to get back to some longer term financial planning, some modeling. So that might be something, looking again at the Collins model is what we're basically working off of.
Alana, that was one that I was gonna suggest to in all of the notes I typed. It just
Yep.
seems on repeat. It's a paragraph in everyone discussed need for long-term planning. And
Yep,
you know,
yep.
we talk about that often. So yeah.
Mhm. Who would do we need to have anyone with us, particularly? Lori? Or do we just want to, look at it ourselves and try to do some digging and hashing and then at first?
Would it make sense for us to come together and just have a conversation about what we want to try to do before we start bringing in like Lori to actually do it?
Mm-hmm. What we want it to look like, sort
Yeah,
of the long term. Yeah.
what we want to include in it, how we want to approach it, our timing, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That way we can be prepared to have good questions for her in advance.
And Greg, can you remind me what the status of that model is right now? Like, are we going from, do we need to worry about, if we're trying to work off it, that it's not really going to be helpful where it's at? Do we need to ask for any
That's a
numbers
good
up?
question. I don't
Okay.
think, I'll tell you my perspective. I don't know if this is going to answer.
Okay.
So we got the model and it was mostly filled in. Mike Guzzo was, I don't know, let's just say distracted. He wasn't like adopting, he did not take ownership of the model as I was hoping would happen. And then when Lori came on board, being that she's the town accountant, not the finance director, she has slightly different scope in her responsibilities. And I was reluctant to sort of assign her to that. But she has taken a look at it anyways and filled in some of the data to update it from, I don't remember when I got the model. Maybe it was probably 2 years ago. But she is interested in updating the model. She is familiar with it because she came from Townsend, and Townsend used it for their budgeting purposes, which I believe is a potential, that's a goal, at least of mine, and I think of this body as well. And I know the budget subcommittee is also interested in it. Select board member Jeff Swanberg is very interested in modeling and projections. So there's a good amount of push to start doing it. And just as you brought up, Alana, as we're kind of like just in the little sort of like window between town meetings, and that window, by the way, is even smaller for my finance team than it is for you guys, because as you just heard, the finance teams are still doing end of year transfers to transition to the new fiscal year. And that's a significant undertaking. But if there's a little bit of time, this is probably it, because even tomorrow night, I have the select board considering a schedule for the special town meeting, which is October, I think we're proposing October 24th, but I don't recall. But it's about the same time every year.
24th.
Yeah, thanks, Dick. So it's about the same time every year anyway. So this is the cycle. And it's about July, August when if there's going to be any sort of like special projects, this is it.
Which is, of course, you maybe get a summer vacation mixed in here and there.
I took mine and I get one more week in August and that's it. But like,
good for you.
But no, I think we're on the same page. I think I am interested in this model. And sort of like, I don't think it's going to be shocking what it tells us. I think Jillian and Bob told us years ago what it's going to tell us. And we're going to use that, but with updated data according to growth projections, etc.
Okay. Yeah, it's the updated data I'm most concerned. I don't want us to do too much work on something that isn't going to properly represent. So that was my big question is, for one thing, I don't think I have a copy of it that's since 2021, I want to say, in the fall. So
yeah, probably not. Probably not.
So, yeah, so I just want, so one, are we working off the right one? I
Yeah.
guess would be my question. And two, does it need work before we really start?
I think it's a good
working.
question. I don't want either party, whether it be your side or your body or the finance team, and primarily I'm looking to Lori,
Right.
to do like work in silos. Like I think it should be collaborative. So it's up to you, Madam Chair, if you want to. I don't know what your plan is. If you're gonna like,
Okay.
if there's gonna be like a liaison to this particular project, or if you're gonna do so far as like name a subcommittee. Of course, subcommittee gets complicated because then you have to abide by open meeting laws. But
Right.
if you just have. Right. My recommendation is probably just to have a liaison to the finance team for the modeling.
Right.
And then that person can, one person email one person being Lori.
Right. Right.
And then they say like, what's it look like these days?
Yeah,
This is where it's
yeah.
at. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
Can
Peter, go
I-
ahead.
just on that, it's really just a point, another thing to put on the list of stuff.
Okay.
Just to recall, one of the issues we had back when we, started to try this, and, we were showing these large deficits in the future, and, we were all talking about various ways to cover those deficits. One of the issues that arose was, why haven't we had to do it already? And so I think the idea was it would be a useful thing to go back and apply whatever planning model we come up to FY14. Do the projections going forward, which I assume would show the same thing, that we will have increasing deficits, and then try and look at the actual things that happened and why, where did the model change, or how is it that we haven't already done large overrides, for instance? Or, is it really that 129 Parker saved us for 4 years, and now that it's over, it would just be an interesting exercise to know. I think if we do the model applied to FY14, we're going to have the same outlook, as of FY19, we're going to have $1 million deficit. Somehow we didn't. So
Right.
What is it? And that was one of the questions we got when we were doing the model in
Right.
the prior time is, wait, you're showing all these deficits. I just don't believe that they're really going to happen. So again, it's a couple of steps down on doing some modeling. But that was one of the things that came up last time we did this.
Just a quick question. What modeling software are you using for this? I think someone mentioned the Collins model.
That was a spreadsheet designed by a consultant we got through UMass Boston Collins Management Center or something.
That's right.
So it's basically a spreadsheet, and it's a fairly simplistic model that, projects revenue, and you can look at, 2.5 and, make assumptions about new growth. And then from the operating budget, you assign, I think we were something like all the town departments get 1.5% and the schools get 4%, was kind of something along those lines was the assumption. And then, where does that put us in 5 years? So it wasn't software. It was fairly,
Yeah.
A fairly basic spreadsheet.
Okay. I guess these are the same consultants that wrote the financial policy manual? Because I saw that and I saw UMass get mentioned there.
Yes, it was the
Yeah.
same. I got a grant from the state and I got 2 projects out of it.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Is there anything else for agenda items? Okay. And I also did want to say, speaking of vacations, so our next meeting is July 25th. The meeting after that would be August 7th, and I will be away. So we can discuss at our next meeting agendas for that, if Jillian is around, or who would want to run it, etc. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then our other August meeting would be the 22nd, just to have on your calendars. All right. Any other FY23 start of the year questions, suggestions from committee members?
Can I ask something completely unrelated to anything we've talked about?
Sure.
Are we intending to continue Zoom meetings?
That is a very good question. Speaking of which, Greg, did we get the extension from?
No, it's not been passed by the.
Didn't it
so
expire?
July
It
15th.
expires July 15th.
So I don't know. You should watch the news because I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Okay.
The Senate passed a version, the House passed a version, but because they were different, you need to go to conference committee and you have to figure out what's going to be the same.
Okay.
And then eventually that has to get to the governor's desk. So I
Okay.
don't know. I suspect it wasn't a question of whether it's going to be extended. It is going to be extended. The two different bodies had like different dates of how long, and there was a couple
Okay.
other details. But everybody was like on board with extending it.
Okay. Well, quick poll, I guess. If personally, I'm happy with continuing on Zoom, and I believe that was the general thought for the committee. I did ask Greg. We had an email exchange about the hybrid option, and the thing about the hybrid option, the fully hybrid option, where we're in the select board room and we can have committee members and other participants on Zoom and have committee members in the room. And that is something that does have a cost to it. Correct, Greg?
Yeah, because well, yes and no. So until last select board meeting, we were reliant, and we still are to a degree, on WAVM. So WAVM, we have a student or someone sitting in the back and they're working the controls. But last select board, although I wasn't there for it, we set up like what's called an OWL system. So that's a brand, that's like a company, but it's an OWL sort of like camera microphone system.
Oh, okay.
And so if you go to YouTube, you can see how it looked. I thought it looked okay. And we kind of have to learn, like people have to project a little bit more to get to the microphones. But it's
Okay.
but that's an alternative. But then it's a matter of space because you'd have to figure out when to have those meetings. That's not already a select board or otherwise. But we have a couple of those OWL systems. So
Okay.
you pop one of those on a desk and you can meet. But that goes over the internet, so it doesn't go, then we sent, just like y'all do, we send it over to WAVM and they upload it to YouTube. So instead of like it being real time, if you don't have a kid in the back working the controls, it doesn't go out real time to that PEG channel.
No, that's all right. We don't, the real time stream is fine. I'm more just concerned that if people would like to participate remotely and we or some of us are back in person, or if we have to be back in person, that we have an option available to us.
I think you do.
So
Yeah.
the owl will transmit out on Zoom.
Yep.
People could attend, they could listen in on the meeting live via Facebook. They just wouldn't be able to do it through the live stream like usually.
Yeah, like
So-
on
Right.
whatever channel. Yeah.
Basically, it's set up as a camera via Zoom. Only, basically what the owl does is it's got a camera that pops up and it can detect, we use them at work, and it can detect who is speaking. And if there are multiple people speaking, it can, show the picture of multiple people speaking.
And the people that are participating remotely, you can hear them? Like, can someone
So-
who's,
so in
someone
the
who's
sel-
on Zoom at home, can they participate or can they just watch?
So in the select board room, yes, because we
Okay.
connected, because we did use the WAVM connection to plug it into the big, there's like the two
Okay.
big screens in
So
the
we can
select
see
board room.
them and they, right.
Yeah, and I think they do that downstairs in town hall too, in the Campbell room for the.
Well,
planning
we
board
get
room.
the select board room, Greg.
Sure.
Okay,
So-
like we get
But-
that room. That's
Yeah,
our
yeah.
room too.
Yeah, I think
Cool.
that's cool. So if we can, if given enough like heads up, we could probably figure out how to make sure those big TVs were turned on for y'all. But to
Okay.
your point, if I got to pay a kid to sit back there, to
Then
make sure
it's a
that
cost.
happens, then
Okay.
there's a cost to that. But we already own the owl. We already
Okay.
have the Zoom accounts.
Or
Great.
we can go back to meetings the way it was and not record them.
It's not so much the recording is just, I want to make sure that, you know, all of our members are comfortable.
Well, so, yeah, so I think there are some members who, based on past, have said, and frankly,
Right.
I think there are probably going to be times, even if I'm wanting to be there, generally speaking, there may be a time where I can't for whatever
Right.
reason.
Right. But generally speaking, I certainly am happy to continue on Zoom, but if there are any members who are absolutely, you know, really would like to get back in person, you can let me know as well. Natasha, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the Senate approved their version and the House had an amendment to it, which would mandate hybrid meetings for
Oh,
all. So that is, I think, part of the stickler, because I think that the municipal, maybe I think it was the MMA released a letter today against adopting that, because it does put that burden on municipalities to do, you know, hybrid and all of
yeah.
that. Right. So I just wanted to add, I think that's part of, they didn't adopt, the House didn't adopt exactly the same as the Senate, and they were a little bit more expanding and trying to codify hybrid meetings permanently going forward. I think where 1/3 of the body would have to be present in person, but the rest. So
Okay.
anyway, yeah, just a heads
Okay.
up. So it might be decided for you
Right.
whether you want to do hybrid or
Right,
not,
right, yeah.
if that is what passes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just stay tuned. I will let you all know as soon as we know. Greg, I'm sure you were going to let everybody know as soon as you heard, and I will keep you all informed. Anything else? All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Jill
Alright.
second.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote on that. Ken,
Yep.
Danielle,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Thank you all for being here, and I will send out the agenda when I have it done, and we'll see you on, I've lost my calendar. What'd I say, the 25th?
Thanks again for the school department support this evening.
You're
as well.
welcome. You're welcome.
Have a
All
good
right.
night.
Good night, everybody.
So Alana, I
yep.
just
Hi,
want to
Jake.
let.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Night.
Dick.
Thanks,
I just
Dick.
want to let you know that on the 22nd, I'm going to be out, 22nd of August.
Okay.
all
I'll
right?
make a note.
Be out of town.
Okay. Good for you. I hope doing something fun.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Driving to Georgia to drop my daughters off.
Daughters. That's right. Both of them. Wonderful.
That's big.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
All right. Thank
one's
you
a
all.
sophomore,
All right.
one's a freshman, so.